I think we are live.
Okay.
Hi, people.
I didn't know if we could see ourselves on the phone.
Of course you could. We could check on our phones if we went live. Let's do that right now.
See how I'm doing.
If we are live, please go ahead and drop an emoji, say hello, anything that will allow us and allow us to know that you're here.
I didn't know if we could see ourselves on the phone. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's us.
That is us. That is we.
Okay, who joined here? Let's see who's here. Hi, hi Zach. Who else is here? Are people here? Drop a comment or something that I know it's you. And then, are you on your phone? I feel like always in the beginning of these lives, I should have on some music to keep it interesting. And
to keep it interesting, and I don't know if does this shut me off?
Moran, hi.
Yep,
Michelle,
yep.
hi. Do you see comments?
I see. Well, it says 3 comments. Maybe if I say see. Okay. Hi, Michelle, Moran, Zach.
Yeah. Okay. You see.
Yes.
Awesome.
I do
people
see
are
that.
tuning in. Hi, people. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's episode is going to be amazing. I could guarantee that. Jerry, could you guarantee that as well? That way people are sure they're in the right place.
I can guarantee it'll be authentic.
Okay, yeah.
Whether it's amazing or not, I'm not sure.
We'll
No,
stick to
I
that.
like to have a good time around a very important topic.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we could I'll introduce myself, I'll introduce you, I'll introduce the topic, and before I introduce any of that, I seriously don't have words to express my feelings about this live. This is, like I said in the post promoting this live, this is going to be different level. And there is a reason why I said that, and you guys are going to see it for yourself. So for those who don't know me, I am Yitz Goldberg. I am a self-esteem coach. I help top performers take off inauthentic masks, deal with hidden pockets of low self-esteem, and build deep, authentic inner game. Jerry Wise, who joined us today, is a relationship coach and a self-differentiation expert. He will explain exactly what self-differentiation means. And I can promise you this term is going to change how you view self-esteem and how you view yourself within the relationship with yourself and within the relationship with others. And in today's topic, we are going to talk about taking off inauthentic masks and developing a more authentic self. So Jerry, you want to say hello and say who you are, what you do, what you're about?
Sure.
Hi, Shosh.
And Yitz, this was it's such an honor to be on the program with you. You are very insightful and definitely focused on growth and purpose and
Thank you.
Direction, and that's how I have known you. And I like talking with people who have that focus, who are wanting to learn more about themselves and how themselves operate, or their selves or themselves operate within relationships. And I have been working in many different roles for the last 40 years, from pastoral counselor, marriage and family therapist, priest, marriage and family expert, to now I've finally grown up to be a life coach and a consultant, also utilizing a systems approach and a relational systems approach to helping businesses and entrepreneurs get out of their fogs and get out of being stuck. Because oftentimes,
and you're going to explain the connection between a self and a system, right? How it actually falls into a system. Okay.
Yes. I hope to do that. In fact, I can do that now. In fact, one of the notions, and by the way, there's no one theory that I have that just, I think, explains everything. I think there are some systems theories that I like, that I think have lots of truth in them and lots of helpful guidance for us. And one of them, which is a Murray-Bowen family systems approach, which can be applied to all relationships, whether business, marriage, family, friends, the department store clerk, and you, anybody, because it's how we as a self function in relationships. Entrepreneurs, people who are leaders and in the area of growing success, those types of individuals oftentimes have or developed a sense of themselves and a sense of self and how they operate within relational systems. And that includes business, marriage, family of origin. All they've begun to see and understand a sense of themselves and how they function. Because actually, one theorist said there is no such thing as self. There's only self in the system. And that's where I think when we talk about, when people say, well, can you help me with self-esteem? Well, yeah, I'd love to help you with self-esteem. And they say, well, how do I get it? And I go, the problem is it's either in you or it's not in you. You don't get it somewhere because it's self-esteem. So it's not other esteem, it's self-esteem. And so how do you learn to do that? There are some ways that we can help people learn to do that. The other thing they will talk about, this self-esteem type of approach, also has a very siloed or individualistic way of looking at psychology and relationships. And I think the new way to look at relationships is within the system. That's a more mature way to look at relationships. And so we talk about the self in the system. And so self-esteem now becomes a systems term rather than an individualistic term. Self-differentiation is differentiating yourself in the system, staying connected in a system while being yourself. And that's what self-differentiation is. Being able to be yourself, be an authentic self, while staying connected to a system. Sounds simple, but it's not.
Definitely not easy. Can I share my own experience with self-differentiation work?
Surely, or explain it more clearly than I do.
No, you did a great job. It's just I think I'll share my own experience, and maybe that will allow people to understand it better. So I first ran into the term self-differentiation in the past year and never heard of it. And I always viewed self-esteem as kind of the core. Now, if you do real self-esteem work, self-differentiation is part of it, no matter if you like it or not. But when you focus on self-differentiation, it takes your self-esteem game to a whole new level. Now, when you say self-differentiation, it's about understanding who you are, where your boundaries, what your boundaries are, understanding your values, understanding your feelings. And when you start understanding all of that and start disconnecting all of other people's boundaries, let's say your family's boundaries that are inside of you that continue controlling your life, or other people's emotions, if you are carrying other people on your back, which is something I definitely struggle with, and maybe even sometimes still struggle with, then you are not experiencing your own emotions, you're experiencing someone else's emotions. And if you went to pursue a job or work that your family wanted you to do, your mom wanted you to go study this thing, or your partner wanted you to go work in this place, then that is not your true want when it comes to getting that work done. And then that means you are not being self-differentiated, because a self-differentiated person will know to realize that that is someone else's want, that is someone else's expectation, not my own.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Did I put it in a...
I think that's well said. Yes. And when we get stuck, I remember consulting with a company here just this past week, and the president of the company was struggling with the vision, mission. It's a family-owned business, but successful one, and there's three other brothers or whatever. There are a number of people. It's a family-owned business, and so it can get very cloudy and very unclear-headed when you've got family and business, and it's all stirred into the same pot. And whenever he's learning that whenever he is unsure where to go, unsure what to do, unsure how to solve a problem or see through it, he's often become unclear about himself. If he can get clear self, then the rest of the company and the rest of what's going on becomes much more clear. But we have learned to de-self since we were very young, most of us. And so using that as a tool to get unstuck, whether in relationships or running a company or being in a marriage or with your friends, are you clear with you first before you begin to solve a problem? So being authentic is a part of the solution. Being self-differentiated is a part of the solution. And of course, becoming clear-headed is worth its weight in gold. I think there are two things that are valuable, so valuable that's beyond price: calmness, clear-headedness. If we have those two, there's almost nothing we can't do.
Maybe make the connection stronger between self-differentiation and clear-headedness. As someone who's been putting in the work of understanding how I am understanding myself and doing the self-differentiation work, I could understand how clear-headedness might look like when you suddenly understand your boundaries. But maybe you have like a quick example of how those two connect and how those two look in real life.
Well, and maybe I can use the example of this particular company leader, and we don't know who he is. I'm not giving his information, but he's just, he could be any leader in, let's say, a company. But whatever system we are working with, again, whether it be family of origin, marriage, friends, synagogue, church, whatever group we're in, a group we're a part of, we oftentimes have been imprinted by our family of origin. And so we operate out of roles. We operate out of learned observational blindness. We've been taught not to see certain things, a certain naivety we have learned. We have illusions about things that we've grown up and learned those, such as I believe my parents will someday become the parents I always wanted. I believe someday that the vice president of this company will be somebody he's not. Those are illusions. And then we lack a self-awareness. We don't know our preferences. We don't know our beliefs, and we don't know our values. Well, if you can reverse all those things, then you become clear-headed. That's where clear-headedness comes, because operating out of roles is not going to make you clear-headed. What you're clear-headed about is the role that you play. And in this particular company situation, he wears the hat of a brother, a shareholder, a president, an uncle. He has all these hats. And when we began work, he wore them all at once, and it was a mess. As we developed the work, he began to wear them one at a time, and he began to get clear about his roles and whether that's the roles he wanted to play. How did he want to be an uncle, a brother, a president? What's his, where is he at with that? Not how are all they defining all that for him, but how does he define those for him? Once you begin to examine and do those things, then you start being clear-headed, and you can really start to see changes in the organization and success and clarity, and all the issues come out then. Whereas before they were all kind of hidden, and you're just kind of walking in the dark and wondering, well, how are we going to fix this? What new problem are we going to fix? Because there'll always be new problems, because the system will always bring up the same problems over and over and over, only it might be in different ways. And so I think that clear-headedness occurs when we're clear about us. And so we have to do some of that work on our roles, naivety, illusions, self-awareness, preferences, beliefs, values. We have to do some of that work. Boundaries, right? And that could be part of the preferences, that I prefer not to do this.
I actually would love for you to elaborate on boundaries. Besides the fact that is probably the biggest thing I am currently working on. This
is a self-focused question.
No. I'm like, I'm doing this work, and the reason why I bring up boundaries is because I hear a lot, specifically in top performers and stuff like that, where they lose themselves within the system, meaning they don't necessarily understand where they end and other people start. So this could be in their personal relationships, this could be in their work relationships, or even more common in their family relationships. There are so many people who are so good at what they do. They could literally work at Facebook, they could have a 6-7 figure business, and they are the most successful and respectable people out there. And then they go back home and they suddenly feel like they are little children who have a hard time dealing with their parents and their siblings. So if you anything to elaborate on the connection between that and understanding your boundaries, and then communicating those boundaries to get a better understanding of who you really are and get that clear-headedness.
Well, and I believe that someone, if they're in a business or their organization and they begin to lose themselves, they lost themselves a long time ago. It's just now coming out in this new system or this new circumstance. So we have to go back and shore up what has happened in the past, and also learn to live differently in the present system. Boundaries do not work without self-differentiation. We will try at boundaries rather than having boundaries. Having boundaries requires change. And so many people talk about boundaries as something you try to have. If you're trying to have them, you're probably not going to have them. If you're trying to be pregnant, then you're probably not pregnant. Now, I suppose you could be and not know it. I mean, that could happen. But with boundaries, I think what I've found is once we have discovered ourselves, once we have owned ourselves, boundaries become a whole lot easier, because then the fear of what other people think or do or feel is lessened dramatically. And so that fear goes down, and then the boundary goes up, and it's not a reactive boundary. And I think a lot of people have reactive boundaries. Well, I'm just going to tell him I'm not going to do that, right? No, that's a
Instead
reactive
of,
boundary. It's you're doing a boundary out of reactivity. That's not self-differentiation. That's reactivity in the form of a boundary. And
what does
that
a real boundary look like?
a real boundary comes out of my sense of self-differentiation or my sense of self. It is a choice, and it comes out of my adult self, not out of my child self or the inner child or the broken inner child or the whatever you want to say, the immature part of me.
Immature.
Yeah, it comes out of the adult self. And many of us are learning and striving to be adults and learning how to do that. And that's not easy. And that's millennials, that's 60-year-olds, that's 50-year-olds. I mean, I can just about tell somebody's emotional age when I meet them. Because they may be 40 years old, but they're acting like they're 13 emotionally on the emotion. Yet they may be very successful. They may have done many great things, which I think is marvelous. But they operate too much out of a pseudo self rather than a real self. And we do have both. All of us do have both. And I think working towards a real self-differentiation, is really where it makes a huge difference in our success, in our clarity, and we will either, well, I'm not sure, you bring a certain empowerment when you are self-differentiated. There's a certain power that comes with that. Not power over somebody, it's power over yourself. That's what you're bringing.
It's a certain confidence that I am doing the right thing because it's right for me.
Right. I'm doing this because this is me. And and again, we always hold on to me a little loosely. I mean, I'm always learning, I'm always tweaking, self-differentiation is a lifelong process. It takes a lifetime and then another lifetime, and I don't know if I'll get another lifetime, but at least I need to do it the rest of this life. And and I think that and so the me that's today is much different than the me when I was 20 years old. Much different. And self-differentiation or change in the self is irreversible. I can always tell if somebody hasn't changed deeply and changed their game, but just have adaptively changed or just reactively changed, because they'll reverse it. Real change is not reversible. If you've really changed, you can't go back. You don't go back. That's, I mean, how do you, right. Once you learn 2 + 2 = 4, how do you unlearn that? Tell me how you go back to learning that's not the case. I don't, and that's how real change is.
That's a powerful example. I never thought of it as that.
And people go, oh, well, I've learned 2 + 2 = 4. Then they walk out the door and act like 2 + 2 = 3. Now, what do I think about what they've learned? They haven't learned it yet. They're just thinking they learned it. But if you learn it, you really have. And if they've really learned it, you can't unlearn it. Once we know 2 + 2 = 4, we don't mess around with that anymore. I mean, it's done. But I think the same is true emotionally and can be true emotionally. And these aren't just my beliefs. These are things I have learned from other writers and authors and theorists and people who are really good at self-differentiation.
And also from your own work on yourself.
And if I don't do it for myself, I cannot impart it to anyone else. I can only take someone as far as I have gone. I can't take them beyond that. And so I'd like to think I've gone a little bit to be able to help some people, go beyond. At least I think I can help some people go beyond where they're at. I don't know that I can help them to go all the way to the final finish line, because I don't know that I've made it there. So I haven't. So, but if I can help you go 20 miles down the road, that's not bad. That can be very valuable. And if you can take me beyond that by what you've learned, then I'm with you. I want to go.
That's some powerful and deep stuff going on over here. I see that questions are coming in, and I absolutely encourage that. So if you have questions, go ahead and write them in the comments. You seriously have an amazing opportunity to ask Jerry. Well, I'm not sure if anything you want, but anything related. And Shoshana's asking, what defines our emotional age?
Okay. Let me write this down.
Oh, another question came in. Yeah. So how do you work on changing roles that we
Right. I was going to try to address
have been in for so long?
Right. I was going to try to address both of those.
Before you answer, that actually connects to a question that I wanted to ask you, which is, how do you take off inauthentic masks? And this is kind of the same exact question in very different words, because a lot of times these roles are not authentic to us. These are not the things we really want to live by, and it's a lot of times certain masks and roles that we are wearing just to please those around us, or because we are used to being in that role from when we are a young child. We were forced to be in that role.
Sure. What defines emotional age, at least in my mind, and again, this is my limited understanding of things, but I think of emotional age as, at what age generally are we operating in our emotional system? Because we have two systems, the thought system and the emotional system. And at what age is the emotional system operating? I think of someone as being, the more immature we are, maybe I should say it that way, the more immature we are, the more blended and fused are the emotional and thinking systems within us. The more separated they are, the more we tend to be more mature. And I don't mean being...
Could you give an example of being fused and together versus being separated and still being yourself?
Oh, I can give you a really good quick example.
Sure.
Someone says to me, or I say to someone, hi, and they say, what did you mean by that? I know they have a fused emotional and thinking system because they just did a feel thing. They put together both their feelings and reactivity and came out with this question. I don't know. I just said hi. Didn't mean anything by it. I just said hi. So when we're reactive, then we have a fuse about anything. Well, you don't love me. You've never loved me. You blah, 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 blah. I could never trust you in this business, and you never. That's somebody who's fused their emotional and thinking systems, and that's a very immature way to operate versus learning to separate them and understanding them as different systems. The more we can do that, the more self-differentiated we can be. So now I don't know where we were going. Oh, emotional age. So with the emotional age, I'm thinking about how fused are their emotions and their thoughts. That's going to tell me, and how they think and how they how they communicate and how they talk, because we're just gonna be us when we're us. I mean, we can't be anybody else but us. We may be messed up us, but we're still going to be us. And so when I hear someone who's overly reactive, who tends to enmesh too much or fuse too much emotionally with others, or someone who's really, really distant, you know, and is way too distant. Because if you're too distant, then you're either fearful or immature or can't handle intimacy. And that's going to indicate a certain emotional age. And then if we have traumas at certain ages, let's say we had trauma at 10 years old, trauma at 11 years old, we may get stuck in those ages emotionally. And in fact, a way to find out how mature you are, oh, I'm sorry, your listeners will hate this, but I got to say it. If you want to find out how emotionally mature you are, go back to your family of origin and interact with them and tell me how you function with them.
Wait. Stop a second. First of all, family of origin is the complicated way to say family.
Okay,
am I correct?
Right. Well, the nuclear family is who you're married to or who you're with and your kids. Family of origin is always the family that you grew up in, where you originated.
Your brothers,
right.
Okay.
Right. It's where you originated.
So what you just said is...
So go back to your family and see how you function. Do you function like a teenager? Do you feel put down? Do you feel like you can't speak? Can you act your age? Most of the time, we can't act our age. If we're 49 years old and we go back to our family of origin, we don't act like 49-year-olds. We're reactive. We get upset. We feel hurt. There could be a lot of stuff that goes on. We feel left out. We feel put in a corner. All those things that we can act or feel like inside.
You feel like you lose yourself, I think, is a very big one.
That's right. And that would indicate your emotional age. Because the theory goes, you are as mature as you're able to act with your family of origin. That's one of the basic tenets. Now, I believe there's other ways to act mature in other relationships as well, but that's a core one because the family is so core with us. And because that's where we started. That's where we got imprinted. If you can resolve your intimacy struggles with your family of origin, just think what will happen to all your other relationships. It just flows out.
And when you say system, right, because we started out talking how we all operate within a system, this is exactly what you mean. That you could have you could think you have high confidence and high self-esteem, and then you go back to your family and suddenly you are challenged and you realize that it's not only you in the picture over here. There are other things that affect you. There are other people that you connect with that have an impact on who you are.
And so this high flying self you had over here, the high flying self that you have over here might be a pseudo self, and the real self is the self you have when you go with your family. And most people think it's the opposite of that. When I go be with my family, I think it's a pseudo self. When I'm functioning out here in this adult world and I'm on top of everything and cool, and that's my real self. No, it's the opposite. It's really the opposite. But we can really function really high with a pseudo self.
People do that. I could give a quick, it's not a quick example because it's not a specific example, but ways to act out of a pseudo self is, for example, to get your sense of worth from your title, from the amount of money you have,
right,
from groups you are connected with or connected to, certain clubs that you're part of. When that's your self-esteem, then that is a pseudo self. That is not who you really are.
Correct. And so when someone comes to me and starts giving me all of their vitae or their, their whole life and all that they've done, I'm kind of going, why are you, I didn't ask for all that, and why are you giving me all that? And it may be wonderful that you've accomplished all that. I mean, I'm thrilled for you, but methinks you protest too much. As Shakespeare would say, what I don't know if it was Shakespeare or not, but anyway, the why are you sitting on those laurels? Why do those matter to you so much? Not that they're of no importance. I'm not saying they have no value. I'm very happy that you have those and have had those experiences. But I'm not sure I'm getting to know the real you. That's what I'm not sure I'm getting to know. And I'd kind of like to know the real you, not because everybody can have a pretty fantastic pseudo self, and can act like things are just fantastic. And I'm not saying you should act like everything's awful either. I'm not saying you should put everything about you out on Front Street or out on the table. I don't walk up to someone and say, oh, how do you do? Let me tell you about my failures. That's not authentic either. That's inauthentic in the other way. So we can be inauthentic with being too vulnerable. We can be inauthentic with being not vulnerable. Authenticity is at the 90-degree mark, not 0 or 180. And oftentimes we operate in the 0 to 180 range. And rather than I share when it's appropriate, and I have no problem sharing when it's appropriate. I know my own weaknesses. I know my own faults. I know the mistakes I've made. And, I also know I have strengths. But I don't need to promote any of those, the mistakes or the strengths. I just am, and that's who I am. If you get to know me, you will get to know me more, about me. Let me go to your question before I answer the changes in roles. Let me go, how do you take off inauthentic masks? And I think that's, people always are asking me, how do I do this? How do I do this? And they don't realize it's not about how.
Drum roll.
It's about when. When are you going to be ready to do this? And so I help them through their non-readiness to help midwife and birth readiness, because they're just not ready. They think it's a how question. Okay, well, let me give you these 3 steps and you will then take off your inauthentic masks. I mean, I can tell you what it's like to take off a mask. I can even demonstrate what it's like to take off a mask. But to teach you how to take off a mask, that's like teaching you how to breathe. I can show you that I breathe. I can show you what I do to breathe. But if you're not breathing, it's your choice. Now, I can say you may want to open your mouth. You may want to take in the, I can do all that. And then you keep saying, then you keep resisting and saying, oh, but I don't want to open my mouth and I don't want to take in air. Okay, then you're not ready to breathe. You're not ready to take off the mask. That's okay. Let's accept you where you are, that you are not ready, because if you took off your masks, as we have talked, Yitz, in the past, what would be the downsides? In other words, what would be the parade of horribles if you took off your mask? And most people are not aware of those. They only look at what would be good if I took off my mask. They don't look at how it would be awful to take off their mask. And I work with people all the time about, if you do this good thing, what bad things do you fear or do you believe will follow? And then once they explore those, Once they resolve those, then they have the baby and the mask falls off. And then they no longer ask me how to get the mask off. They don't ask me that anymore because they're breathing. They're not. They don't say how do I breathe, Jerry? They just are breathing, and the mask is not there. And that's kind of a paradoxical healing. And I think it's much better for higher functioning folks to use that approach because they're very smart, they're very intellectual, they're cognitive, and they will resist. Here's the other thing. Guess what if I gave you the hows? What do you think people would do with those hows?
Leave them behind.
Leave them behind, and they'd resist them. They would resist my hows till the cows came home. Well, Yitz, do this. Yitz, do that. And you will find every way not to because you're not ready. So I can give you all the answers, but if we're not ready, we're not ready. And we will resist them.
And we'll resist him. I think the right to build on whatever you just said. What would you recommend, or not recommend, because we're talking here about not how but when?
Okay.
What are the next steps for someone who is stuck in that when and who is left behind, and they want to be in a different place, but they at that moment they don't feel ready? So what would you help them through?
Sure. Or midwife. Midwife. Yeah. I think of it as a midwife process because I can't have the baby, but I could maybe help midwife the baby. And anybody who tells you they can help you, if anybody tells you they can have the baby or make you have the baby, run away from them. You may want to, and in fact, there's a very good book an old classic by Sheldon Kopp, I think. It's called "If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him." So if somebody comes along and says, "I'll get that baby out of you," run away. If somebody comes along and says, "I'll midwife and help you have the baby," then that may be much more useful, and they'll be alongside you to help you. Because we are talking about self-differentiation, not Buddha differentiation. And by the way, I'm not against Buddha or Buddhism, or I tend to lean that direction. So I'm not criticizing Buddhism at all.
Any Buddhist over here, he's not hating.
Right, not hating Buddhists. No. And in fact, I think actually there's anyway. So with so the steps, and I think of it's not an easy book to read, but immunity to change. I think what we want to do is lower our immunity to intimacy, our immunity to change, and I want to help someone midwife that process of having less of a reaction and help them get immune to change or intimacy or self. And so that can be the process of working on, for example, if I did this good thing and took off this mask, what would be the downsides? Then go talk to somebody who could be a guide or help to you in those downsides. They could help you midwife that. And maybe even you could borrow their objectivity a little bit. And also another way to begin to drop the mask is to fully own the fact you are not ready to drop the mask. And you don't want to drop the mask. And own that for a week or two. And say that every day, all day. I am not ready to let go of this mask. I am not ready to let go of this mask. That may not feel good because it goes against what you want. The problem is it is exactly who you are. It's where you are. And it's better to be where you are if you're trying to get somewhere. If you're not where you are, it's hard to get somewhere else. And so I try to help people be right where they are, and especially when they don't like it. Because I'll say, you know, they'll say, oh, well, I feel so guilty when I'm around my mom when I go home. Okay, say this to me, Jerry, I am not yet ready to stop feeling guilty when I'm around my mom. Oh, they will have a conniption and they will have a fit when I ask them to do that. Why would they have a fit? Because they don't want to accept that. So they're already in a non-self-acceptance place, and that will keep you stuck and will not allow you to move forward. If they can come to accept it, then 3 weeks later they go, you know, I'm having a hard time feeling guilty when I get around my mom. I even tried to, and I'm having a hard time doing it. And I said, oh, that's such a shame. And then we move on. And so owning that can be very powerful, and that's a midwifing, rather than, okay, let me tell you why you shouldn't feel guilty. That I know those things don't work, because they didn't work for me. I read about every self-help book you could possibly find. And, you know, many of them are not all that helpful because they're not based on a, what I consider a second order change, but they're based on a first order change. First order change is changing the symptom. Second order change is changing the root problem and addressing the root problem. Most of what we get for advice today is first order change. And it's kind of, I'm not saying it's of no value whatsoever, because that would be wrong. I don't think it's no value, but it's low value. Low value. Well, so that's the, I don't know if that helps any in terms of any tools about dealing with the mask. The other thing is identifying what are your masks. What's not you? What is a mask you have learned? What's a role that's been put on you? What are the expectations of other people? That's often a mask we use with others because it's what they expect of us. And so those roles are masks. So to identify those can be a real help. Yeah. Someone asked the question, how do we work on changing those roles? And again, we have a how question. And whenever we have a how question comes up, I always tell them, so that means you're not ready. So what I want, because if you were ready, you wouldn't be asking me this question. And questions are everything. Questions are much more important than answers. Questions will tell you a lot. And when someone says, how do I do this? They're not ready. It doesn't mean they don't ever want to do it. It's just within them, it's not the majority within them that wants to do it yet. It's still a minority. It's a 49%. I want to change, not 51% I don't want to change. So they're asking the question out of the 49%. I want to help them get over that hump. And so with the, you know, we go to when, well, you know, are you ready to change that role? And if you're not, let's work on that you're not. Let's focus on that. And then what we can also fantasize and look at, what would it look like to operate out of the new role or the not role?
I'm laughing at a comment that just came in from Eli. Too much info for one interview. Can you have Jerry on again?
Sorry. I'll stop.
This really is, first of all, this is a lot of information, but I think I'm sitting here smiling because it's so much valuable information. Like, well, it's really
the good thing is you can go back and re-listen to, so you don't have to take it in all at once.
Right. That is correct. That is definitely correct. And I could share that I think one of the roles that I was put on at a very young age was to take other people's responsibility on my own shoulders.
Right.
And for me, my journey of letting go of that role is, first of all, understanding where that came from, and then understanding that it exists. Well, I guess understanding that it exists and then understanding where it came from, and then to start acting differently in daily life by just having the ability to choose differently, by understanding that this is a role that was forced on me. No, not in a not in any not in a violent way, but just life, like life forced that role on me with my own life circumstances. And over here we get a little personal, and I'm wondering if you allow me to ask you a personal question.
Sure. Maybe.
What? So the scary part. What is a major role that was forced on you, or that something that you grew up with and you had to get rid of? I'm sure there's a lot of roles, but something very major that was significant for you.
Well, I think one, there would be several, of course, and they can change throughout childhood too. I think feeling as though I needed to be a hero or over functioning, and maybe over functioning with mom and making her happy, because I don't think she was happy. And so my role was I was the youngest, and I was kind of there to be one that was a good kid, and to make her happy. And I felt guilty if I wasn't, whether with either parent. And so the over functioning and the taking care of role was a very major role. And then also that develops into codependency. And so then I begin to grow, and I feel responsible for other people. And again, I saw that as a virtue, as being responsible for other people and caring for other people. But I didn't see the vice part of it. I just saw the virtue part of it. And so it took me into a religious experience in which that seemed to fit: caretaking, loving others, etc., in a religious experience. And which, I'm not against religious experiences or faith or spirituality. But then you kind of become a kind of a paid codependent. And as a pastor, I felt like kind of a paid codependent in that. And again, I'm not blaming them, or I'm not blaming the organization. That was just my emotional architecture at the time, and that fit who I was. And so that role was a very difficult role to leave, because it meant I was really giving up some masks and some roles. And that was not easy at all. Because now I'm not going to please God. I'm not going to please the church. I'm not going to please anybody. I'm really going up against, Now, I've come to understand that much differently now. I don't think God was all that upset. I just thought he would be. And my image of what I thought God would do, image of what I thought the church would feel, and those kinds of things. But there can be real consequences by stopping a role that you've held and operated out of for so many years. Real consequences.
I resonate with first of all, with your story so much, and thank you for sharing. That gets pretty personal. I also I know that part of my own process, you were talking about how you were codependent and getting paid to be codependent. So I think that was after I understood my role in a lot of my key relationships in my life, I started understanding that maybe my field of work is just playing into that role, and which it definitely was. And a lot of my struggles, or a lot of my work, was leaving that role also on a professional level, meaning I could still be helping people, but I am not responsible for their actions or for their feelings, and there's this separateness right now where I might be helping them, but it's still their own journey. I don't take their journey too personally, and I'm not making it sound like as if this is totally behind me, because obviously I'm still
Sure.
working on this. But I definitely resonated with your story and talking about getting paid to be in a certain mask.
Well, and I think, as and even if I became a pastoral counselor and a marriage and family therapist, and I have a master's degree in both of those, and because those were two different works that I wanted to do, and I did them again so I could fix me and so I could fix my family, and that's part of why I did those things. It wasn't because uh, I necessarily had as clear a vision of who I was, but it was like, well, if you really want to help people, then go learn how to help people really, really well, and it just, but I wasn't dealing with me. And if I don't deal with me, then there's going to be problems, and there were. And so that, then my life comes crashing down, and because I'm not dealing with me, I'm making sure I'm trying to take care of everybody else. And that can be real problematic. There was a quote I mentioned, or I thought about in terms of clear-headedness that I wanted to offer. And this is by Rachel Andrews. She says, "The more of me I be, the clearer I can see." The
Uh,
more of me I be, the clearer I can see. By Rachel
was this?
Andrews. And I think uh, that's why self-differentiation work is so important. Because if you don't see clearly, you are going to go in circles, you're going to run into the wall, you're going to be in a dark room with no light and try to uh, maneuver and try to be successful and try to navigate life, but you're doing it without a map, without a compass, without and we need a good gyroscope or navigation system that's working. And so I think in one of your past, or at least some reading I did, maybe in a previous interview, you talked about intuition and intuitiveness and
Yeah.
using intuition, which I think is absolutely important. Intuitiveness is our inner map. But we have to be careful in that we want to have an informed inner map. Otherwise, intuition can lead you in the wrong way. And so we want to make sure we have a clear-headedness about our intuition. And I think self-differentiation is the work that we do to get a clear map, which will then help us to trust more and have a more accurate intuition. Because I know a lot of people say, well, that's just the way I felt I should go. But it was disastrous.
So you're saying that there's a difference between feeling and feeling on a gut level,
Right.
like feeling on.
Right. And that gut level, we want to grow up and mature. We want to mature that gut level or that limbic system, that reactive system. We want to mature that because at a gut level, I may feel, well, why is this person being disloyal to me? I can't trust them. And that's my gut feeling. Well, actually, it is your gut feeling, but it comes out of your brokenness from long ago. Now, how much do you want to trust that? So the more we grow and the more we learn self and the more we learn ourselves within systems, the more we will learn a newer map and a newer way to operate. And we can trust more, and it'll be more valuable an intuition system.
And learning to listen to your gut is definitely a hard thing to do, because that requires you to tune in to your emotions, and you might even be so used to of disowning them. Something that I am working on to learn to experience my feelings at the specific moment when they're coming up. It's something that I could sometimes sit down for 10 minutes just to try to understand what the hell I'm feeling at that specific moment. And by doing that more and more and learning to trust yourself in that process of learning to identify the emotion, and then, because emotions have like a message that they're trying to tell us, right? So
Yes.
by learning to identify those messages and eventually taking action when they come up, like protecting yourself and using those emotions to direct you, that's when you reach that level of listening to your intuition and trusting it more.
And I believe we live in a paradoxical world, especially when it comes to relationships and emotions and those kinds of things. And what I mean by that is what is true is also not true. You may want to learn to trust your intuition more. I also want to help people not listen to their intuition more. Because if someone is emotionally fused, emotionally and mentally, do you want me to tell them just trust your intuition? They're already fused, and so whatever they feel, they just think and go do. So I may want to tell them, no, you're not ready to learn to trust your intuition yet. Because your intuition is going to misguide you. And then as you begin to grow, then you can start, because these people only live out of intuition. Everything they're doing is intuitive. I want them to be more thoughtful than that and not so intuitive when they've blended their emotional and thinking system. Sorry to throw that into the mix.
This is so much powerful wisdom.
I'm sorry
Yeah,
to.
you should definitely rewatch this. I am going to rewatch this. This is like, I feel like I should. This is my guide for the next while. No, but seriously, there's so much wisdom here, and the thing is that it's all connected. Like, it's really all intertwined. There's no one answer. It's not black and white. The journey is complicated, and it doesn't end, and there's so many angles to approach it, and I think also from the way you talk and present things, you feel it, that it's not do what I say. It's not and there's no black and white.
I don't want you to be me. I want you to be you. My job is to be me. Your job is not to be me, but I can give you the way being you might look. Now, how you be you is up to you, but I can give you a way of how being or how selfness looks and how it operates in systems. That will be the knowledge that will be helpful for you. But I don't make choices for you. I got to do my own journey. But I can kind of tell you what, if we're on Earth and we're talking about being self-differentiated, and that's Mars, I can tell you what I think it's kind of like on Mars. And then you can begin to learn Martian and begin to find yourself being where you'd like to be. I did notice somebody asked how they might be able to get a hold of me. And I was going to mention, you can find me at www.jerrywiserelationshipsystems.com. Just as I just didn't want them to. I knew we'd probably get to that, but
you could also message you. You're on Facebook, right?
I am Facebook under the same name.
Killing YouTube.
And a YouTube channel of the same name, Jerry Wise Relationship Systems. And please join me there. I've got a workshop that's available for family of origin work. I'm going to be doing some other workshops too. I think that I was trying to look here. Oh, that's authenticity. I had something about, because I knew you had talked about authenticity the last time. Yeah, I've got
This
a
was
great.
all about authenticity at the end of the
Well,
day. We might
it
have used
really
other
is.
words, but
Right.
if you would re-listen to this and think throughout the whole time of being truly authentic, this is what being truly authentic means. And it doesn't mean you will know everything about yourself in one specific moment. This is exactly the journey. But seriously, just have in the back of your mind the word authenticity uh, when you rewatch this, and everything's gonna fall into place. Like everything's gonna connect. And to me, this whole thing was definitely about authenticity.
Well, and I think here's when you say that inner game, that what I want to do is, of course, not play a game, but their inner game's okay because that's the inner system that's operating. And that inner game, that deep inner game, which is a very good term. I like that term. And I think self-differentiation is about being us again while connecting to other people. And again, that's a simple way to describe it. There are some good books on that. I think Growing Yourself Up by Jenny Brown is one of them. Harriet Lerner is another good author. Andrea Schera, Schara, is another good author.
What books? So, what if you could recommend top 3 books on this subject for anyone watching who wants to literally right now go to Amazon and order them? What would be
Right.
your top 3?
Jenny Brown, Growing Yourself Up. Roberta Gilbert, she is a psychiatrist who's very much into Bowen family systems theory, who wrote Extraordinary Relationships. And, like Harriet Lerner, The Dance of Intimacy, any of her books, Hariet Lerner, Lerner. Any of those would be good. Brene Brown is a new name out there, and she's doing TED Talks. She's also a Bowen family systems person, which is why she's so wise when it comes to shame and all these things. She wrote a brand new book called Braving the Wilderness, which is also excellent.
I had
Because
no
it's
idea she's part of the family systems therapy.
she is, she's
Oh,
she's a Bowenite. And that's the new way of thinking about things, which I think is much more helpful. And again, it's about how do I stand alone without being alone? And that's and
that's
her books like that, Braving the Wilderness. Because we all have to stand alone, believe it or not. I mean, we are born alone, we'll die alone. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't people around us, but we do have to do our life. And then how do we connect with other people while we do our life? I don't mean selfishly our life. I mean self-intentionally our life, not selfishly. And in fact, I think the more fused you are emotional and thinking, the more immature you are, the more over-functioning or codependent, giving, all those kinds of things, actually the more selfish you end up actually are in those ways. I think the more you are your true self, the more you can really be not selfish, because then you're intentionally giving. There are no strings attached. There's no ulterior motive. There's no, what am I trying to get out of this? There's no manipulation.
when I was saying this interview is going to be different level, I meant it. I truly meant it, and I think it was definitely felt. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm definitely going to watch this interview again because I know that for myself, there's a lot here that I could use, and a lot here that I could improve in my own life, in my own relationship with myself, with understanding my and my own self-differentiation journey, but also with my relationships with other people. And for anyone who wants to reach out to Jerry, you could email him. You want to shoot out your email for people to.
Jerry Wise, my name spelled out, JERRYWISE 5, the number 5, at gmail.com. And again, you can find me on Facebook, YouTube, at jerrywiserelationshipsystems.com, or relationship systems in the YouTube, and watch some videos that I have up there.
Definitely watch
Those are
some
some
videos.
ways. I think you'll find some helpful ones. I think a good one, someone is like self-differentiation as intentional disappointment. How to self-differentiate yourself using intentional disappointment. And that was a real popular one that someone just mentioned, and it really, a lot of people have said that was one of the ones they liked. Or another video I have, learning to live without love and approval. How do you do that? Because we oftentimes have too much neediness for that. Not that we don't want and have love and approval in our lives, but often we're addicted to those, and then we get into trouble. The intentional disappointment is when somebody tells me, well, Jerry, you're just not a very good son. And I go, you're probably right. That's intentional disappointment. And now I'm not fused to that comment. It doesn't get me. It doesn't grab me. It doesn't hook me. And so I want to stay out of that fusion when somebody comes and criticizes me and says, well, Jerry, your interview with Yitz really wasn't all that good. Yeah, I know. Lots of weaknesses in it.
Hey.
I'm
Wait.
gonna.
Hey.
And
I'm bringing my reactivity into here. 1 second.
And it's that paradoxical acceptance is what it is. Then I don't have to get upset with them about their critique, because I don't know what their critique's about. Why do they even need to tell me that? Who? And how would you even know that? How would you even know that I didn't think the same way anyway? And how do you know that I even care about whether you think it was a good interview or not? There's a lot of assumptions going on there. So I like that paradoxical acceptance where I can just say, and I can also do a non-paradoxical assumption, which is, well, I saw it differently. That's me just differentiating and saying, well, that isn't the way I saw it. Well, it was a horrible interview. Yeah, well, I didn't see it that way. I'm not trying to change them. I'm just being me. Because I'm not probably going to fix them anyway, I
think this is a perfect way to close up the interview, because it's not me trying to change you. It's me trying to be me. And when you're able to say that throughout your daily life and your relationships, then you're on the right journey of self-differentiation. Well, you're probably on the journey before. Even listening to this interview, you're already on the journey of becoming more self-differentiated. So yeah, this has been great. My brain is.
Can I share one more quote? It's a very short one.
Yeah.
Albert Camus, in his notebooks, 1935 to 1951, wrote, "But above all, in order to be, never try to seem." But above all, in order to be, never try to seem.
That's
Think about
taking
that.
off inauthentic masks. Talking about taking off inauthentic masks.
And pseudo self, and most of us have grown up living to seem. Maturity is about living to be, not living to seem. Sorry, had to.
It's
Shall we go on?
I do think we will need to do a part 2. I'm just saying, Jerry, we might just need to do a part 2. I really enjoy this, and from the engagement and comments, I could see other people watching enjoyed this as well. Please go check out Jerry's website. I'll put them in the comments. I'll even embed them in. I'll put them in the comments, and check out his YouTube channel, because there is. I know we just like dropped so much information right now, and when you go to the channel, there's
so
it's recorded. It's recorded.
So
but also, you could find this exact information in more than 100. How many videos do you have on your channel?
about 130.
So you could find all of this information in smaller videos and in
Smaller
categorized
bites.
in smaller bites. So you should definitely check out Jerry Wise on YouTube, and from there you'll be directed to his email and contact information and everything that has to do with contacting Jerry. Jerry, thank you.
And
Sorry,
I do work with clients individually, and I
Yeah.
do work with leaders, and I do work with people who are learning and being management or executive functions. So I do all that. I let people know that, and if they reach out to me, I can share with them how I might be able to help, or if I can help. It's been a real
And as
pleasure
you can
being with
see,
you.
thank you. As you can see, he really, Jerry really knows what he's talking about. He really, it's part of who he is. So don't hesitate, reach out. I'm sure if you have any questions, send them his way and he'll get back. Jerry, thank you so much. This was a true pleasure, and I'm looking forward for a second one sometime. I'm just saying.
Great.
But,
Well, thank you, Yitz, for inviting me. I really do appreciate it, and I'm glad we could work this out. It was a joy.
amazing.
And I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep or.
People, this is I think the video with the most reactions I've got so far. So I don't think people are asleep.
They're not asleep.
So.
Great. Great.
And thank you guys for joining and commenting and reacting and being part of it. You could always respond after we get off the live, and any questions that I can answer, I will respond to you. And any questions that are directed directly to Jerry, I could send his way and write his answer. So with that being said, again, Jerry, thank you so much. And thank you guys for joining and tuning in. We'll see you in the next interview.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Second, this is the best.